Everywhere.
Okay, so yesterday we began learning Perek Beis, and we got through the first line and a half. The author of it says that in the second neshama of a Jew is called is an actual part of Hashem. The emphasis of the word mamish that everyone spoke about how this word emphasizes the chiddush of Chabad. You see the chiddush of Chabad in the word mamish. That didn't explain in that particular discourse, and I'm quoting from why mamish is the unique to the Chabad school of thought and how this differs from what was before. But it is interesting that, as I mentioned yesterday, in the original Madura, in the first edition of the Tanya, before the Alter edited it, he didn't have the word mamish. The simple meaning of mamish, as we discussed yesterday, you might think when you read it's a pasuk. Pasuk says that the neshama is a part of Hashem. You might think it's just a malitza. You might think it's just like a prose. Hashem is a part of Hashem. It's holy. So the author adds the word mamish to say it's not just prose. It's real. Hashem is actually part of Hashem. But and we learned yesterday the word mamish also means something you touch with your fingers. That means that because the neshama is so holy, because it's so spiritual, because it's so godly, it's therefore able to affect us in a very down-to-earth, tangible, real way. It's because it's so mamish godly, therefore it's mamish affects us in a very tangible way. In Tanya, the number one word that the Alter Rebbe uses throughout Tanya, more than any other word, is the word mamish. Perhaps the reason why the Rebbe says this word is associated with the Chabad school specifically is because Chabad means chacham bin v'das, not just understand something, but to make it real with you. You could try to externally be excited about something, but it's not really mamish. It's not really how you feel. Mamish means that it's true, that it's real, that it's actually physically how you feel, how your reality. So by saying that Hashem is a part of Hashem mamish, that's a very Chabad statement, perhaps because it's something which just instead of it being something which is true and at some distant plane, it's true in a way that's personal, it's real, and you see the throughout Tanya, you see the unique characteristic of the Chabad school from the very first page of Tanya. In fact, before the first page of Tanya, the author says, before I begin talking to you, I want to tell you what I'm talking about. What am I talking about? I'm talking about something which is Korevei Lecha. I want to talk to you about something which is relevant to you. Before learning the first title page of Tanya, Alter says, this is relevant to you. I don't want to talk to you at all. So if you're not interested, or if you think this isn't relevant, then there's no point of us talking about anything, which isn't the way you study anything else in Torah. Torah is Torah. Torah is the wisdom of Hashem, whether it's relevant, which isn't pertinent to what you have to do, it's still Torah. In fact, the Gemara says there are many halachas which never have happened, never will happen. But here, the author, Tanya, Chabad school is about making this relevant to you personally. Hey, welcome back to town. And thinking about what this has to do with you. So therefore, the word mamish, I think, is I think that's maybe why the Rebbe says that the word mamish is a very Chabad kind of thing. It's not just a true thing; it's you. We're going to begin at chapter 2 in Tanya. Tanya's over there. Oh. All right. So this is the truth. The truth is, the neshama is a part of Hashem, really a part of Hashem. How do we know this? What's the source? So to prove this, Alter brings a pasuk about Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon is someone who, in his soul, every soul emanates from. It says that Adam Rishon was his soul was the source of all souls that will ever be born. Some souls come from the heel of Adam Rishon. Some souls come from the head of Adam Rishon. But all souls emanate from him. Concerning the birth of Adam Rishon, it says in the Torah, Hashem blew into his nostrils the spirit of life. What's the and if this is true of Adam Rishon, and Adam Rishon has within his soul all souls, means every soul, every neshama has this unique quality of being blown by Hashem. neshama was blown into Adam Rishon, so to by every Jew, there is a similar phenomena that Hashem blew your neshama into you. What's the emphasis of the word being blown? And not just by another, besides the fact that Adam contains within him all neshamas, the author brings another proof that this is relevant to everyone from the morning blessings. Every one of us says to Hashem every morning, you blew the neshama into me. So we're talking about me personally, not just about the Adam Rishon. And I'm saying that my neshama was blown into me. You blew the neshama into me. What's the unique characteristic of Hashem, of the meaning of the word being blown? The Zayar says that unlike when you speak, you don't use that much energy to speak, and therefore you could speak for a long time. But when you blow, so you lose your energy very quickly, because to blow it requires you to resort to more inner strength. You put out much more strength when you blow than when you speak, and therefore, I think it was Dr. Rabbi Shachat, Yitzchak Shachat, I think it was. He was talking about public speaking at the Knesset Shluchim a few years ago, and he said that he would always get very winded after he spoke, and he couldn't figure out what it was. He went to a doctor, and basically the doctor told him I don't know what the doctor's advice was, though. That'd probably be helpful. But the relevant point was that when he was speaking, he was also putting a lot of oxygen in his speech, and therefore he got very winded. It's possible to speak from here or from here, right, doctor? Diaphragm. So when you speak from when you're blowing, you lose energy, because in order to blow, it requires a lot of energy. So what's unique about the neshama is that all other creatures, and Hashem made every other creature. It says in the Torah, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said, "Let there be a sky," and there was a sky. So all other creatures come from God's speech. They come from, in other words, an external energy of Hashem. But neshama comes from the innermost power of Hashem, as emphasized by the word nafachta. You blew the neshama into me, just like by a human being. To blow requires him to use his inner strength. So to by the Eivishter puts, so to speak, more of himself, his innermost self, in the creation of the neshama. That's one difference between the neshama and other creatures. That's that's what the author mentions here. Elsewhere, so this also says another difference between the creation of the neshama, creation of all the creatures, is that all the creatures, they aren't the word of Hashem himself. Meaning, when Hashem said, "Let there be light," there is light. Light isn't the word of Hashem. There is a word of Hashem, which is "Let there be light," and then there is the light itself. By the neshama, the Eibishter blew into Adam Rishon, the neshama, and the neshama is alive. The neshama is the word of Hashem. So the breath of the heart, which is the source of both speech and the and blowing, and when it both comes to breath of the heart, which the parallel analog for that is godliness. So all creatures come from godliness, but the difference is all creatures come from Hashem's speech, meaning from something external, and the neshama comes from the innermost chayis, the innermost dimension of godliness, from Hashem himself, as indicated by the word blowing, that just like when you blow, you put your energy into it, so too Hashem puts us inside, so to speak, in creating us, not just like, and this is very similar to the difference between thought and speech, as we're going to say in a second. That when you think, unlike when you speak, thought is constant. You can't stop thinking. Many people have tried, but it doesn't work. You can't stop thinking. Why can't you stop thinking? You can't stop thinking because your thoughts are attached to your neshama. The thoughts are about how you are. Your thoughts are always, it's called in Chassidus, levusham yuchad. It's a garment of the soul. It is always attached to the soul, and it doesn't do anything else other than clothe the soul. It's all it does. So it's always receiving whatever's going on in your soul. It's always it's always expressed in your thoughts. It's about what you're thinking. Versus speech. Speech is how you relate to others. Speech isn't about you. Speech is about how you relate to others. So you don't always relate to others. You don't always need to speak. But thought is what's going on within you. So the neshamas come from Hashem's thought. And the word thought just like the word blowing, indicate the neshama comes from something inner, not something deeper, not the way Hashem contracts himself, the way he projects to create the world, but the way Hashem is, so to speak, within himself. And not only does the neshama come from Hashem's thoughts, in thoughts themselves, we have different kinds of thoughts. We have thoughts that are not so important, and we have thoughts which we think about things which are important to us. So let's just read these words inside in a second. Just before we get to read the words inside, just to say outside briefly, regarding the neshamas, it says olub machshav. Literal translation of olub machshava is they arose in Hashem's thoughts. It came up. You also have things that come up in your thoughts, but the word olub machshava also literally means they arose. They went higher. Which emphasizes that neshamas come from the highest parts of thoughts. But just like by our thoughts, we have thoughts which are more things which matter to us more, things which matter to us less. So the neshama comes from the highest and deepest thoughts of Hashem, what he, so to speak, cares about most. That's where neshama comes from. Let's read this inside. So the innermost vitality of a human being is expressed when is emitted by his blowing with force. So too the Jewish souls arose in God's thoughts. Again, they come not just from Hashem's thought, but the highest thoughts, similar to a human being thinking about things which are really, really important to him. So so this underscores how the neshama is a part of Hashem. It's not the way Hashem contracts himself to create the world. Rather, it's, so to speak, the way things are by Hashem himself. Alter brings down another proof that neshama is a part of Hashem. What's the third proof? The first proof, again, is it says about the neshama's creation. Hashem blew the neshama into us. The second proof says about Neshamas Yisrael, they arose in Hashem's thoughts. Thoughts, again, are something which is deep within you, about how you are. And the third proof, B'ni b'cheir Yisrael, first pasuk is a pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu is told by Hashem that he should tell Aryeh, why does Hashem want to redeem the Jewish people? Because B'ni b'cheir Yisrael, because the Jewish people are called my firstborn. Another pasuk later on in Torah, where Torah talks about how we're not supposed to have tattoos, says the Torah, you are called children to Hashem. So what's the unique quality of a child? Why does a child express this idea that we're talking about, how the neshama is a part of Hashem? So the Chassidus says that there's a concept called Yafa Koyach Haben Mekecha Av. What that means literally is that a child can do more than a father can. A child can be greater than his father. The child is not limited to what the father gives him. A child could do more than what the father gave, which doesn't make sense. The fact that the child looks like the father and thinks like the father, and that makes sense because a child comes from the father. How could it be that you're pouring from one cup to another cup, and the second cup has more than the first cup? So Chassidus says the fact that you see that the son is greater than the father, that itself is also coming from the father. That same statement of the Gemara, Yafa Koyach Haben Mekecha Av, there's greater power in the son than the father. That statement itself also could be read as the greater power you see in the son comes from the father too. How does it come from the father? Because there is, within every person, there are two kinds of soul energies. There are chitzonistic keches and optimistic keches. There are external faculties, and there are deeper, higher energies that we don't resort to unless we're in trouble, or unless we have the right teacher that forces us to think of ourselves as someone greater than we are ourselves. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Allah Shalom, used to say about the Rebbe, that he used to say that there are a good leader is someone who could understand the person that he meets someone who can understand what the person has. A great leader is able to see also things which are beneath the surface. You can't see, you can see the whole picture. And the Rebbe said is unique among great leaders. Not only does the Rebbe see all about you, the Rebbe sees also what you could be, sees the potential. So regarding the son, why can or as Rabbi Din Steinsaltz used to say, it's like imagine growing up your whole life that you're thinking that you're growing up together with your fellow ducks. And someone comes over to you and says to you, "You're not a duck, you're an eagle, you fly." It's a whole different life. So that's the unique quality of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe reveals within us these inner soul powers that we have. So a child does get some soul powers from his father, which are revealed, but the source of those soul powers are from the essence of the father. And the essence of the father isn't revealed in the father himself. So it's possible that when the father gives over to the son his akor, the son can reveal from the essence of the father more things than the father ever revealed. So that is what the Alter is saying by saying the son we're called children of Hashem. That means that we come from Hashem himself, from Hashem's essence, and therefore we are called children. The child comes from the essence of his father. Where do we see that the child comes from the essence of his father? Truth is that the Alter doesn't prove that a child comes from the essence of his father in Tanya. In general, I don't know the reason for this, but Ramelech Tzibal Vashom told us that in Tanya, the Alter in general doesn't talk about levels above Chacham. He alludes to levels above Chacham. He doesn't explicitly talk about levels above Chacham Vatzilus. So it's a klal, a general rule in Tanya. There are hidden still higher levels, but he didn't say why, Ramelech. I don't know the reason. Could be that it's that since Tanya is meant to, as Rebbe Rashab once told someone, Tanya is like Chumash. The great don't understand the depth of Chumash, but even a child understands something of Chumash. And so too, the Rebbe Rashab said about Tanya, the great don't understand the depth of Tanya. Alter himself said how he learned the Tanya, he studied the Tanya. Alter wrote the Tanya, he studied the Tanya. So, but yet even a child can understand something from the Tanya. So it could be that's has to do with the various kinds of language used in Tanya. I don't know. Pirush. So just like a child emanates from the brain of the father, so to all neshamas come from the thoughts of Hashem, and more they come from the chachma of Hashem. The neshamas originate from the chachma of Hashem, and unlike before, we were just talking about how we come from the Hashem's thoughts, and now we're adding the word chachma. The difference between chachma and machshava, we discussed several times. Machshava in general is thought versus wisdom in Hebrew. The difference between them is thought is letters. The way you concretize ideas that your soul understands, that's letters. That's machshav. Then there's an actual understanding of your soul itself, and that is chachma. So you could say 2 + 2 is 5. You could write 2 + 2 is 5. You could even think 2 + 2 is 5. But can you understand 2 + 2 is 5? You can understand. Why not? Because that's your chachma. That's the way you understand things. The machshava, the thought is just letters. So in general, machshava doesn't indicate something which is of the core. Just you could think about things that matter to you very much, but they're not your very core itself. However, it says about the neshama is called a child of Hashem. And just like it says about a human child, the child comes from the chachma of the father. The father's chachma is what produces the zera, the seed that gives birth to the child. So too, the neshama comes from the chachma of Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem. That's just the chachma of Hashem. It's not Hashem himself. So by human being, the chachma is the Alter describes our chachma as our core. In Tanya, the Alter says it does in Torah in Parshas Vayera, the Alter Rebbe says that the chachma of a person is compared to their very core, because relevant to the more external parts of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action, the garments of the soul, the inner parts of the soul, like our inner faculties of chachma and midas, our intellect and our feelings, they could be called the core. But it's still not the very essence of the soul. And the 10 soul powers may be considered innermost or inner compared to the more external faculties of thought, speech, and action. But this 10 soul powers aren't the soul itself. The soul itself is above the soul powers. So the Alter says the Hashem's chachma works different than our chachma. By Hashem's chachma, he indeed is one with his wisdom. By a human being, the soul powers are not your very core. You could call them the core compared to the more external faculties of thought, speech, and action, but it's not really the core. Regarding, however, Hashem's Chachma works different than our Chachma. How so? It says the Zohar, the Iu Chacham of Chachma. Hashem's wisdom is not like the wisdom known to man. What's the difference between Hashem's Chachma and our Chachma? Of course, there's many differences, but for our purposes, difference is Elohu v'Chachma Seyach. Hashem and His wisdom are one. Difference between a human being's Chachma and Hashem's Chachma is by Hashem, He and His wisdom are one. And therefore, because the neshama comes from Hashem's Chachma, therefore we could say about the neshama comes from Hashem Himself, because Hashem and His wisdom are one. Of course, of Rambam, as the Rambam says, that unlike by a human being, there is, when you try to learn something, there's three things that play when you try to learn something. There's three things that are part of the conversation in every act of study. There is you, there is your ability to learn, there is your power of wisdom, and then there is a subject matter that you're trying to learn. But the way that by Hashem says that Hashem is both the source of knowledge, Hashem is the knowledge itself, and He is also the knower. Hashem is the knowledge that is being learned, Hashem is the wisdom, and He is the one who knows this. He is the one who knows, and He is the wisdom. Now, so that's how the author is answering the question. Just because we say Hashem is His wisdom, just because we say that just because we say that neshama comes from the wisdom of Hashem, that doesn't mean that neshama comes from Hashem's essence, because wisdom is just a faculty of Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe addresses this question here, and also addresses a question in Torah. In Torah, the Alter Rebbe says two explanations. In Parshas Vayikra, the Alter Rebbe says two explanations of why the neshama, although it comes from Hashem's wisdom, we're calling it as an actual part of Hashem. One explanation is there is with the Eibusher Himself, and there is a way the Eibusher contracted Himself to have wisdom, to create the world. Even the way that Hashem contracted Himself, that also could be called godliness. As we'll see in the note over here on the side, that even the way Hashem contracted Himself, that's also called something godly. That's a first answer. That's the answer Alter says over here. Hashem and His wisdom are one, and that's also godliness, even though it's not Hashem's essence, but it could be called godliness too, even though it's the way Hashem contracts Himself, but it's still godliness, as we'll see why in a minute. That's one explanation. Another explanation the Alter says over there in Torah is that there is, the neshama actually comes from the essence of Hashem. There is something of the neshama, the yechida, the deepest core of the neshama, the yechida of the neshama is one of the essence of Hashem. So there is an element of the neshama which is taka, which is external, which is not the very core of the neshama, and that comes from Hashem's chachma. And then there's a very essence of the neshama which comes taka from the essence of Hashem. That's what it says in Torah. Okay, so but here in Tanya, what's Alter saying that the neshama is called godly. Why is it godly? It's godly because it comes from Hashem's chachma. And Hashem's chachma is also called godliness. Why is the neshama? Why is wisdom of Hashem? Why is the wisdom of Hashem one with Hashem? So the Rambam's trying to answer a question. When the Rambam says that Hashem is the source of knowledge and Hashem is the knowledge itself, what the Rambam is trying to answer is, Hashem says in the Torah about Himself, I, Hashem, haven't changed. He hasn't changed. So how, when He has changed, just like I changed, when I learned something new, I've changed. So Hashem also knows what's going on in the world. The world's always changing. So l'chera, Hashem should always change because He is always learning things. So to answer this, the Rambam says Hashem, the world is one with Him. Knowledge is one with Him. So it's not considered a change in Him because He is the knowledge and He is the knower. And so it's not considered a change. There isn't a change. The wisdom and Him are one. That's what the Rambam says. But the Maharal, in his introduction to Gvuras Hashem, takes issue with the Rambam because at great length, the Maharal says that Hashem can't be called just wise. He's not just, like some wise grandfather, as the Eibusher is the wisest one. He is the wise one. The Eibusher is beyond the parameters of wisdom. The Eibusher created wisdom. Wisdom is a thing. God made things. So saying that Hashem is wisdom, in the language of the Maharal, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to say Hashem is wisdom. Hashem is beyond wisdom. Hashem is beyond parameters of everything. So the Rambam says, it sounds so brilliant to you to answer these questions, the Maharal says it's ridiculous. You can't say that. That's if the Maharal sounds like it's almost heretical to say Hashem is wisdom. That means Hashem is limited in a box. He always is wisdom. You can't say that. So what is a pshat then? Is Hashem wisdom? Maharal says Hashem is beyond wisdom. So the Alter Rebbe is quoting the Rambam. So does the Alter Rebbe agree with the Rambam against the Maharal? So the Alter Rebbe addresses this question, whether he agrees with the Rambam or the Maharal, in the note, Hagar. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Kabbalists agreed with the Rambam to a certain extent, as we'll see how they agreed and how they disagreed, or more accurately, how they translated the words of the Rambam. Of course, about Paris Ramak. The Ramak agrees with the Rambam, as he writes in the Pardes. Even according to the Aryeh, this is correct. What does Alter Rebbe mean when he says, even according to the Aryeh? As great as the Ramak portrays Hashem, the Aryeh goes a step further, way beyond the Ramak. As we discussed a few times, the famous teaching of the Ramak says that the distance between here and Atzilus, of course, not talking about physical distance, but the difference between here and Atzilus is less than the difference between Atzilus and their Ein-Sof. That's what Ramak says. And the Aryeh disagrees. The Aryeh says, if that's what you're saying, that the Marak is saying an amazing thing about Hashem. We think this world and Atzilus are so far away, so different from each other. But Atzilus, which is the way Hashem, it's also Atzilus is a place of godliness, but it's the way Hashem contracted himself. It's not Hashem's truth. So the Marak says the difference between Atzilus and Ein-Sof is far greater than the difference between this world and Atzilus. The Aryeh says, according to the way you're saying it, this world is even more different, is even more farther from the truth of Hashem than Atzilus. Let's put it in miles, even though miles are the wrong term, because we're talking about difference in what the thing is, not in where the thing is. The difference between Atzilus and the infinite light of Hashem is not as great as the difference between this world and the infinite light of Hashem. That means there is a measured distance between this world and Ein Sof, and there's a farther gap in the physicality of this world from the infinite light of Hashem than the way Atzilus is different and other and limited in comparison to Hashem's infinite light. So the Aryeh takes issue with this. The Aryeh phrases this differently. The Aryeh says, compared to the infinite light of Hashem, the highest world and this world are equal. They're the same. Because the Aryeh introduces the tzimtzum. The Aryeh introduces the idea that tzimtzum, that in order for anything to be produced from Ein Sof, there had to be a tzimtzum, and what the tzimtzum is not for now, but basically that there is a major gap between anything and infinite light of Hashem. Oh, it's already 7 o'clock. I can see by Michal Mordechai's hat wearing that we've gone beyond our limits. Okay, so the infinite light of the Eibishter is beyond Atzilus, and it's beyond this world. And compared to the infinite light of Hashem, Atzilus and this world are the same. So the Alter Rebbe says that even according to that Aryeh, according to his Kabbalah, Hashem's infinity is even greater than the Kabbalah of the Ramak. Still, even according to Aryeh, the truth of Hashem being one with His wisdom is that there is a truth that is a truth. Where is that a truth? In the world of Atzilus. Somehow, the Alter Rebbe elsewhere in Tanya calls this the secret of faith. The spheres in general of Hashem, though all the different ways Hashem contracts Himself, are called the secret of faith because it's impossible for us to understand that on the one hand Hashem is beyond the parameters of any of the 10 spheres, and on the other hand Hashem unites with them. In other words, we can't say about Hashem that Hashem is other than His wisdom. His wisdom becomes one with Him. Even though Hashem is beyond wisdom, yet Hashem's wisdom becomes one with Him somehow. which is beyond the scope of our last few seconds of the class and beyond the scope of a human being, as Rambam himself says himself. It's not something a pure human being can understand correctly, clearly. Rambam says, it says in the pasuk, if you try to understand Hashem, can you? It says your thoughts are not like my thoughts. So therefore, we're not going to fully understand how Hashem's wisdom is one with Him, but suffice it to say that there is a truth of Hashem which is beyond Hashem's wisdom, and saying that the neshama has in it the wisdom of Hashem is identical to saying that Hashem is a part of Hashem. Okay, I'll stop here. But then there's another part of the neshama which is even the essence of Hashem mamish, which is beyond the wisdom of Hashem.
The distance between birds of fear is the same as the distance between birds of
Atzilus, correct.